Hello, everyone, and welcome to the SPL Rundown, a weekly breakdown of SPL action during the next phase of the SPL. Every week, I'll be joined by our analysts, Lermy Wormy, Frost, and Rathan, to break down the past week's SPL sets, as well as interview a player or coach from the SPL. We hope to have guest analysts in the future, so let us know who you want to see on here. This week, we're talking about Phase 1 playoffs and looking ahead to Phase 2 and the midseason patch. Let's get started with the Phase 1 playoffs, and our first set of the tourney was PK versus Radiance, and PK started off real strong with the Game 1 win, but then the Dodgy comes out, and Adapting comes out, and King Kenneth comes out, and Radiance just seemed to take the rest of the set pretty quickly. What are you guys' thoughts on the first set in the quarters?
Who wants to go first?
Who wants to go first?
I mean, we can just talk about the obvious Dodgy. I mean, Dodgy didn't really get played up until that point very much. He was more like a niche pick, and they picked it second a lot, which I didn't really understand because Dodgy is more like a counter pick. But, if PK are just like, yeah, cool, Dodgy, whatever, the first couple of games, and they're like, it's not going to work out for you. So they pick Hunbots and Artio into it, and I'm like, what's going on here? And then they just lose over and over again. So, I mean, I don't know, man. I think this Dodgy was a really interesting pick. She was very underrated for a lot of what was happening in that kind of meta. It has changed significantly since then to, favor different kinds of junglers. But it was a weird choice up against PK, and PK just didn't respect it.
Yeah, I thought also that the Humbats into Dodgy was just like really, really, really bad. Like, you just go into the powwow as soon as the Humbats comes out, and you're like, sort of, you've traded there. Very effectively, I feel like.
Yeah, when it comes to late game team fights, go ahead, Frost.
No. I think, though, it was the perfect storm for Radiance against the Knights. Because you did say she gets picked second as a counter pick. First things that, Knights were picking. Merlin, Hunbots, every time. Merlin, Hunbots, and then, for some odd reason, I can't blame those two too much because I'm going to go with a strong pick every time. But then Neil didn't really do himself a favor picking these supports that were more going to get into the fight because Dodgy just works that way. She needs two engagements. The one that's going to get all your stuff to get thrown out. So you're jumping away, you got your beads, whatever. And then the second engagement where she's going to go in, drag you back in, or kill you. And we hold on. Before that, are we allowed to mention the interview? Or are we going as if we did?
No, you can mention the interview.
Awesome, because in that interview, Aurora mentioned that he does not play with the other people's comps in mind. We know Zap does that as well. They refuse almost to acknowledge each other. Yeah, he's got a strong hell. He's got a strong this, but we're going to go in. We're going to do our own thing. If this is true, with neither of them planning for each other, then PK was just at a severe disadvantage having 2-3 top picks that had no way of getting away from Dodgy. They lost the mid 3v3s in the drafts just immediately every match. And the first game didn't go too well for Radiance. Radiance did not play that too hot.
Now remind me, did they get Dodgy in that first game? Radiance?
Yeah, they did.
They had Dodgy in all of them.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, they had the Dodgy. Cubo Fred popped off. I kind of almost disagree with the idea that like Dodgy is a super counter pick to Hunbats because if you're ulting a Hunbats in the middle of a team fight who's already dumped his ult and wasted his kit, he's pretty worthless at that point. To begin with, all of his abilities are down. His main team fight disruption's down. I mean, it's almost a waste of a Dodgy chain at that point because he's really not going to do anything. I completely agree that having a whole fleet of other characters like Artio and Merlin that don't have CC immune ultimates is a good target for him. But I don't think that it's specifically the Hunbats counter. I think they're both equally effective.
I just mentioned that because I remember watching a bunch of highlights, and it looked like every time the Humbots would ult, Dodgy was going straight into the powwow and trying to re-engage off of PK's engagement, which I thought was a pretty clever idea. And maybe that's not like a complete counter pick, but situationally, it seemed to work well into the Humbats ult.
Dodgy creates panic.
Yeah, go ahead.
Dodgy creates panic. She goes up into that powwow and people just they spread out. A little less in the Pro League. They're a little bit more tight on their team fights, but just in general, you see her go up into the air, and it doesn't matter who's dumped what or what person is vulnerable in the other team. You're like, oh god, I gotta pay attention now. It creates doubt and something to think about.
Sure.
Well, it does make the chaos. It's also, we have into our minds, Daji's going to go in, she's going to pull people back in, we're going to do all the damage there. But she herself does a lot of damage. And throughout the entire tournament, whenever you had Daji, the whole point late game is to just go into the powwow and drop 3 shots into the mage or the jungler, whoever it is that's going to be there, maybe the ADC, just to try and get them out. In the first game, I think Adapting forgot that a little bit. He was splitting chains, trying to get as many beads as possible, and just wasn't doing that much damage. Whereas in the second game after that, he was getting the players without their beads, and then in the game afterwards, he was just sort of focusing chains on one person.
Yeah, the biggest issue in their game 1 comp was definitely the fact that they had, a lot less than they did in their other comps to deal with the beads, because it was basically every single time Adapting was getting those beads, or like they were using it in a direct engagement in like a 1v1 or something. So like the fact of the matter is, when you show up to the fight with the beads still, and then Daji has yet to use the ult, so you throw the Hunbat's ult out, the Daji goes up, and then it's just the damage at that point because they still got the beads, because nobody else on that team comp, like Nike didn't do anything like that. Terra can't really get in there immediately. And like, for instance, you're not really going to pop beads on Terra Root. The only thing that you're going to really pop them on is going to be the walls. And, like, he's good at hitting the walls, but it wasn't as consistent, and it's not on as many targets as you really need to. Whereas in the next couple of games, it was a little bit different. They had a different support, and they had a different soul laner. So they had Benji on the Amaterasu, at least in the second game, which is definitely something that you have to beads as a carry. Because if she's just walking at you with the ultimate, it's really, really hard to get away from that.
As a noob, which I am, I feel like a lot of maybe casual or lower level players feel like Daji is like the ultimate version of Ares jungle. But it seems like you guys are saying like, worry about the damage on those chains because it does a lot. Is there a way to sort of like figure out that the CC is not the best part of the kit there as it relates, like, for like other gods? Like, how do you decide like that the CC isn't the important part, but the damage is?
Those are the rest of your team comp.
That'd be how fast you're killing somebody was almost kind of a blatant thing, especially in ranked, because Aurora mentioned that some of the meta does draw out from ranked sometimes. The strength of Daji being, as opposed to an Ares jungle, is her 1, 2, and 3 is basically Loki.
Sure.
And then you have the ult, which is Rom Snipes.
Yeah.
It's just so much blatant damage that you can put out on one person.
All right, people have been going kind of back and forth too about whether or not you should build Hydras on Daji, but this is something that Adapting with picking up consistently. And just, it's like what Frost said, it's basically the Loki thing where you pop the 1 on them, you've got the Hydras proc, and it doesn't even really matter after that because they're at least 60% HP, and so at that point they've got to be really scared about that.
Sure. Are there any...
Going back to the ultimate in general, sure. If you don't have a lot of CC in your team, if you don't have something that's going to pull the beads out, I mean, it's useless. I mean, for just your casual and rank play, like if you've got, Guardians and Warriors, just don't, or, somebody picks a couple Warriors in the support and soul lane, and you just don't have the CC there, then, I mean, you're basically using it for damage, right? You're never going to pull somebody in. They're going to have a Magi's and beads constantly. Nobody else is going to get anything out. And, if anything, you use it as a team fight disruption or deterrent versus like, hey, this is, we're going to make a play off these chains. Unless you absolutely know somebody's vulnerable.
Sure. I guess I never looked at it because obviously I'm a noob, but like, I've never considered the damage on the ultimate, especially from the chains, to be significant. Whereas it looks like it's actually pretty significant, and I need to read my tooltips better.
It does a lot of damage. It does a lot. If you hit all 3 and then you pull them, I think it's got to be close to like 1,200 damage, I think.
So you got 110 on the base plus 60%. You got 180% scaling. It's absolutely nuts.
That's pretty crazy.
That's a lot of damage.
You get all the ticks, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you get the ticks off the pull.
Sure.
You get at least one when you pull them in. So at the very least, they're taking minimum 290 plus 80%.
Well, and I think the other thing is, like, if they beads the first Palau hit, you can still hit them with the other two, right?
Yep.
And even if it doesn't pull, like, you're still getting that damage in.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Couple that with the ROM pick that Cyclone loves so much, because that's how he engages in his team fights. He'd go straight up into the air, put the mid down to about 50% health, and then you can't really stick around. You don't have to be dead. I think that's a very common misconception a lot of players make. You don't actually have to kill somebody to win these fights. They just can't stick around.
Yeah, if you poke them out enough, then you sort of win the fight by default because it becomes a 4v5 or something.
Yeah, I play with a lot of beginners, and that one's really hard to get across to people is, look, they've got 100 HP left. They're not coming back. They have to back. Don't chase them all the way out and lose the rest of the team fight for it. And, Frost is right, especially, as we saw in later matches where the Terra was running a Soul Reaver. She'd blink in, alt Cyclone to go up into the air and just pop somebody with 3 shots and basically take them out.
Yeah.
To the point where they have to leave. So, yeah.
Especially for this meta. The last thing about this, I'm focusing a lot on the Daji just because he did bring it out for the whole tournament, just phase 1.
And we'll probably continue to talk about it as we look on to the other games that happened in the phase 1 playoffs. But I mean, we have to bring it up
unless they nerf Nemean. Daji will never get played. Because you'll buy Nemean and an upgraded shell instead of Aegis, and you will literally live through all of our damage.
Gosh, there was an SCC game this past weekend that was 4 upgraded shells up against, I think it was Mollusk's Amaterasu, and it was just ridiculous. You could not get any attacks off.
Nope. Well, Nemean buys... The thing about upgraded shells is, like, especially the same thing with, like, Loki, is you have to have your timing right there, right? And, obviously higher level players are going to, but you have to be cognizant enough to be like, oh, man, my carry's getting dove. I got to get this shell off. And then we've got 2 autos worth of time before we got to figure out some other form of peel. Now it's like you got the Nemean stacks, then that buys you time to get your shell off. Then you've got your Aegis or your, whatever self peel to help you. I mean, any guy that uses any kind of auto attack cancel is straight up dead if the carries start buying Nemean. It's such a good item.
I mean, we've been seeing carries picking up shell over Aegis recently, so it could be a trend. Who knows?
Yeah, because it's like shell, but you can still do damage. Or it's not like shell. It's like Aegis, but you can still do damage.
Yeah.
Okay, any final thoughts on this first game 1? I know we really didn't talk too much about PK, but they kind of underperformed here, at least I think even to their standards.
I thought they had a bad set. I think they dropped the ball.
It was a bad set. I think they didn't have their teamwork cut out for them. On top of their mechanics, as it was made obvious when Zap and Cuvo tried to 2v1 Cyclone.
Oh, yeah.
As a CERN, they dove into his sweet spot. You're not going to outbox a CERN with the passive. He's just going to get essentially more autos on you.
Okay. Moving on then to our second game of the quarterfinals, which was Ghost versus Renegades. And this game stood out to me as the sub game. Like Solar Troll wasn't playing in this game, and neither was Captain Twig. So I'm going to start off with that. Do you think the subs made a difference or not? Would the outcome have been different if we had both Twig and Solo? Or one of the two? What are your thoughts on the subs and how they affected this set in particular?
I mean, I've got the SEC bias where I see Baskin's nameplate on a team, and that's just an easy dub for them. It's unfortunate because Ro is a good player in his own right, but I mean, it's Baskin, what can you say?
Ro's just not a winning condition compared to Baskin. He ran those games.
You could argue that the Baskin trade out was an upgrade. Like, I like Twig. I think he's a good player. Baskin has consistently performed as one of the best players in every role that he's ever played in for the entire time he's been playing Smite. Twig's good. Twig was struggling earlier in the year, I want to say. But I
think that was to be expected, though, a little bit.
I see it as an upgrade more than almost.
I mean, Twig struggles in the early on. I think everyone sort of expects, like, if you switch roles, there are going to be some rough waters ahead. But I think a lot of, I watched the Ghost. They put out a little documentary recently and they all feel very confident in Twig and his ability, which of course that's what they're going to say on these videos. But and what do you think about the new WoW? We hadn't really seen too much new WoW been played up until I guess that was Twig later. I don't think they played new WoW in this set, right?
That was against SSG.
I think I'm remembering all the
that was
sets.
Twig against SSG, and I can't wait till we get there because that was beautiful.
Yeah, I have things to say about Nuwa because she is.
Let's save that. Let's save that for a little bit later. I'm getting my games confused. Do you think the Renegades can still compete with these sorts of teams in LAN environments like we saw here? I know it was a pretty quick game, a quick set that is. It only went 3 games, if I remember correctly. But
yes,
do you think?
I think they can. I have full faith in them. I think they've proved at least a couple times throughout the first split that they can execute at the highest level when they want to.
Mm-hmm.
And usually when you see like I'll call them bottom tier teams, but usually when you see bottom tier teams win, it is less about them playing well and it's more about them capitalizing on really dumb mistakes that higher tier teams make.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see that as the case with a few of the Renegades wins. I can't remember them off the top of my head, but it never seemed like, can't remember who they beat, but it never seemed like the teams they played, had a bad day. It was, they played well as a team. They executed on their strategy. Jake came out guns blazing with the Horus and just slapped the holy hell out of people.
Mm-hmm.
Versus like, you kind of look at some of the Obey wins and you're like, well, were they playing well or were the other teams playing poorly? And I have some words on that later, but I think, if I think it's Solar Trolls is an extremely mechanically talented player. He's very good at the game. Ro is very good too. Ro has won SPL games before where he's had to sub in, but short notice asking him to come and play with basically a god puddle.
Yeah.
Where the other team's trading out for Baskin.
Yeah.
I think this went pretty much predictably, but I don't think it's a reflection on them as a team when they are playing at full strength at all. Actually, I almost ignored that set because it's just not representative of them and their ability to execute, in my opinion.
Sure. Do you guys have any other thoughts, Frost or Lermy?
That is basically it. It kind of was just said and done in the team selection.
It was done on Twitter when they made that announcement. It was over.
Comes Baskin for all the games.
Shit.
Okay. Moving on, I guess, to Radiance versus Sanguine, and something interesting happened here where Sanguine was able to choose their opponent due to the extenuating circumstances of COVID-19 and the way that this quote-unquote LAN was handled. Do you think this choosing dynamic, had a lot to do with the outcome at all? I know Aurora said he thought Ghost, was a bit scared of Sanguine and that they had been scrimming together a little bit, and he felt that Sanguine was starting to take some of Ghost's strategies and playstyle a little bit and incorporate it into their own. So what do you think about the choosing dynamic that happened? Because this is something new and we haven't really seen this in the SPL before. And also, what do you think about Sanguine? They're rookies and they were the first seed in this tournament. So go for those.
No, I've still not decided how I feel about the pick your poison kind of format. I don't know. It was strange to hear that first seed gets to pick, but then that sort of gives you something else to shoot for. And I do like it's almost banterous in a way. Mm-hmm. Who do you think is a free pass into a final?
Mm-hmm.
Or if it's something personal, we'll take you out at quarters. I don't know. Mm-hmm. I think
I agree with Ross there. I like the kind of idea of just, picking which one is the freer fight. And unfortunately for Sanguine, it didn't work out for them in that way. But honestly, looking at the quarters performances, I think I would have picked the same. I think that they just didn't really come in with a game plan to deal with it. And it just felt like Radiance, outperformed them in every measure of it. And they came in with strategies, obviously, but Sanguine are the rookies. They haven't had as much time to deal with these kind of SPL level strategies. especially from an even playing field in terms of like connection and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I completely agree there. I mean, I think even if you look at the finals, right, Radiance versus Ghost, which one was the technically easier team?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Ghost outshined Radiance. So, which one do you think is gonna, like as Frost said, which ones do you think is gonna give you an easier time getting into the finals? And they picked, would it have been different had they played against Ghost? Who knows? But I think up until that point in the season, Radiance had kind of been underperforming, right? I mean, they typically middle of the pack team.
I would say the second
really
half of phase 1 was a little bit disappointing for them. There were some losses that didn't look particularly good. Like, there are definitely good losses in the SPL. But these losses were looking a little shaky. So
I think the entire playoffs, they kind of woke up, right? I mean, they came to play finally, right? I mean, the last 3 weeks, especially of the regular season, they were terrible. So if you're Sanguine watching that, maybe you see a couple glimmers of hope out of them versus Ghost, who's been strong all year. Which one are you picking to go up against? Of course, it's going to be Radiance.
Absolutely.
For him, but
especially in this meta and Sanguine's playstyle, where it's hold out until about the mid to late and then capitalize on a mistake. I'm going to go for the sloppier team. And on record, it's definitely Radiance. Some of the, that initial game, Sanguine versus Ghost, where they actually took it all the way, super late game, I don't think they could have overcome something like that. I think Radiance went toe-to-toe with Ghost. I don't think Sanguine could have got there.
Okay. Speaking a little bit more about Sanguine, what are you guys' thoughts? Like, these guys are rookies to the league. They come in, they get the first seed for the Phase 1 playoffs. Basically, they're on top of the league at this point as rookies. I don't know if we've ever seen a team this sort of new. I know they're not entirely new to the scene, but this new to the SPL doing this well. What are your thoughts on the rookies doing this well so far?
Go ahead.
I was going to say, personally, I think, first of all, I'm glad to see, because after all of the crap that was talked about them is not a good team, and everybody ignores the fact that these guys basically live with each other to play online and get better for a whole year, while it's basically like a Challenger Cup team, which is an insane commitment in its own right. To see them come out and swing was really cool. I think the first couple of games, everybody underestimated them. And I think the games after that, they started taking them seriously and realized it was too late. My opinion on them as a team, I think they're kind of like meta slaves, if that makes sense. Like they're extremely good at executing whatever is like the meta, right? They don't seem to be very creative. They don't step outside of a very narrow box. You're never going to see Tom Pickett Daji, right? Or anything like that. Like, they're just going to play the top tier gods every single time. And I actually think that coming out of these midseason changes, where they're going to have the least amount of time to prepare for their games, relative to the meta change, and there's going to be another obvious change when they do a bonus balance. I think they're going to struggle coming out the first couple of weeks. I think until it shakes out and they really have a good understanding of what the meta is, after these big shifts, I think they're going to have problems.
I do think that these guys have a love of Smite that's kind of unfounded in the scene. They play Smite literally 24/7. I've never seen any pro players play as much as them. They're constantly grinding ranked. They're in all of my casuals. Anytime I queue up at like 3 a.m. just to play one game. Oh, there's Panatom on the other team, or there's Shinto. Like, I want to get into these queues.
When I was grinding duel to get to Masters, I think I ran into Panatom like 3 times. Each time on a Mulan or Athena or something stupid, but he was always there.
I think that just complete love of the game and just their ability to be so synergistic with each other, because like Ray said, they have been playing together for a very long time. They love each other. They are great teammates through and through. I think that passion can definitely push them far, but the issue is, they do have a lot of knowledge, but they've got to act on it. They've got to come up with their own game plans, because like you said, they're kind of just sticking to one-note comps. They're not really adventuring out. And of course, we're not in the scrim, so we can't see, have they tried other stuff. But from what we've seen in the SPL and competitions beyond that, I think we just need to see them reach a little bit more to get to that full potential.
When I was talking with Aurora, I had ask him a couple questions about this. And I know you brought up Metaslave. Shout out to Scream here. But do you feel that Sanguine have the potential to be able to like set metas in any way, or do you think that they are the kind of team that needs to see how the meta is going to play out for a couple weeks? Like I recall, especially like some of the old Bara teams were in that fashion where, you know, they would be good, but they kind of would wait for the meta to sort itself out for the first couple of weeks and then focus on really honing in on that. Do you think that's sort of where the Sanguine team is in terms of reacting to the meta, or do you think they will? I mean, they've had a month off now to put things in the tank to try and sort of set the meta themselves.
Yeah, I mean, the meta just changed a week ago, right? Or less than that, 5 days ago.
Right. No, that's what I'm saying. Like, do they like? We haven't seen them rise up and, you know, put things into the meta the way that other teams and players have done in the past in the SPL. And I was wondering if you thought they have that potential.
You could argue that Horus Jingwei was kind of coined by them, right? Like, I mean, I don't think I saw that.
Oh, that was definitely season 6, Raffer. And Jingwei had been used all the time. No, that was definitely in the SPL.
I thought Raffer was Terra Jingwei. Because I remember that one.
That sounds familiar to me, being the Terra Jingwei.
Yeah, because it was the clap into the gust, and then you'd blow them up. I remember that one.
It was definitely a rank thing, the Jingwei horse, because everybody fights into it. And then you get stunned, and you get tossed up, and you get murdered, and it's no fun for anyone.
Well, and I would also say that, you know, Horus was pretty meta anyway at the time when Phase 1 started, I think. So I'm trying to see, with all these changes that are happening, is there a way that they can take advantage of these changes to make a meta that is more suiting of their playstyle, maybe? Or
their playstyle. Okay.
I mean, their playstyle is pick the meta stuff, and then I don't care if you know that I'm picking it. I'm going to play it at such a high level of execution that it just doesn't matter. Like, that's literally what they did. Like, you knew Netrio was picking Jingwei every single time if it was open.
I think that's their problem, though.
Yeah, no, I think it is their problem, because you do that enough times and people start to they intentionally figure out ways around it, and they spend all their scrims in practice doing it, right? But I don't know. Unless we see some like serious meta creation coming out of them, like, I mean, they've been the same repeat. It's Jingwei, Chibalanki, Horus. I don't even know what else they played in what Ryan played.
Lots of Merlins.
Yeah, just tons of Merlin,
Raijin,
and that's it. Merlin, Raijin, and then I think it was Horus Kepri, right? Like, those were the only two you really picked, right?
He was Umoja too.
Yeah, Umoja as well.
Yeah, I think you accidentally hit it when you said some of the old Bara teams is they do have that playstyle of solid foundation, but I look at teams in this is how well you're doing currently, and then how I predict you're going to do based on potential growth. And there's some teams, even when they're super sloppy, once they get it all together, have this big aura for potential growth. Whereas Sanguine, I feel like from here to final form is not that big of a leap. I think they're playing all out all the time. And when you do that, it's just too obvious for everyone.
I agree with you there. I think that their biggest issue is not necessarily their gameplay. Their gameplay in general is very strong. They've been really great team fighters across the league, and they have pretty safe gameplay in the early game and beyond that. Their biggest issue is that when it comes to the P's and B's, they don't really come out with anything unique. And like you said, it makes them predictable. It makes it so that everyone else is going to say, okay, you've done this a million times. It's time for us to now go in and find something to counter it. And I don't know, they need to kind of transition through their metas a little bit quicker, because we know their play style. They like to wait, and that's just kind of what they've been coined to be. So if they are kind of stuck in that gameplay and they don't have any other like mode they can switch to or a comp they can work with, then it's going to be very predictable from the near future. So if they can make the adaptation, then by all means they're going to be a 6 squad up in this next split. But that's the big concern, is can they make that adjustment?
Especially with this upcoming meta where it's sort of engage heavy. We've seen them engage on other teams, and it's a little sloppy. We're seeing Rong Yu dying under tower to obey by Wolfie, like 5 minutes into the game.
All right. Any final thoughts on Radiance versus Sanguine?
In summary there, I think it was I think it just came down to Radiance decided, okay, this is what we want to play. This is our play style. And unfortunately for the Knights...
For Sanguine.
Oh, you're talking about Sanguine now? Yes. Why did I say Knights? What the hell? Unfortunately for Sanguine, they also did the same thing that Knights did. We saw Rongyu getting yoinked by Daji because he was playing Ganesh. They did not evolve within the tournament. I don't know why they're so adamant to play the ranked meta in the SPL. In the SPL, that meta will change way faster than anything we can have, just based on what it is that they like to play, whatever playstyle that they want to do. They can play in a manner that we don't, because we don't play with 4 other strong players who can be super organized with us.
All right, that sounds good. Let's move on to Ghost vs. SSG. And I think a lot of people, myself included, were thinking SSG might be a favorites to get to the finals here. And Ghost gave them a run for their money and then took it from them pretty quickly, I'll add, in 3 sets. So what are your thoughts on this Ghost versus Renegades set?
SSG.
Oh, my bad. SSG. I'm getting confused now, too.
Dang it. I've done it now.
I think SSG dropped the ball.
Yeah.
I don't think Ghost played particularly well. I mean, they just did what they were supposed to. It wasn't anything crazy. They didn't capitalize. I mean, they capitalized in their mistakes, but it wasn't like, you know, some earth-shattering strat they had to pull out. They just had to play Smite, and SSG through every single one of those games.
I also just think that, you know, I think Cherio is a very good mind when it comes to Smite. He picks a lot of really unconventional stuff, but Erlang Shen's not it. That's just it. That's the whole statement. I hate that character. I don't think he's very good right now. And, you know, I love the signature Kali. I think that's a great pick, especially if you're building a comp around it. But he played Erlang Shen twice in this set, and boy oh boy, it did not look good the first time. I don't understand going back to it a second time.
I still like Erlang. Also, I did get to see this set. So
I think SSG are even more adamant about their play style as opposed to Sanguine. The only difference is that they play things that they're very comfortable with. You got like Hera, and you do have the Erlang, the Kali, which also assist in that predictability. And I think they were just kind of undone by, this is what you like to play, so we're going to play against it. Even though no team will admit, it's almost like a sign of too much respect. Yeah, I did my homework. I knew you were going to play this character, and then I just built around that. No one's going to admit to it.
Mm-hmm. I know this SSG squad is pretty similar to the Renegade squad of last. It's exactly the same, except for vote. And the Renegade squad of last year was really the one who tried to counter the invade meta that was creeping on in the middle of the season. And in my opinion, they like to play games a little bit slowly, which kind of contrasts to the fast-paced way that Ghost likes to get into their games and, you know, build leads quickly and push leads, you know, until the end. Do you think that these sort of playstyles competing against each other showed that it's better to focus on the early game, for lack of a better way of phrasing it? Like, not that SSG don't focus on the early game, but I think they're a little more willing to give up things early and look for fights late to win late.
I think it's kind of a two-pronged sword because Sherry really likes to play these late game characters, and they're really just trying to focus on him. I think I really like his style of being the facilitative jungle over the carry, but their comp just doesn't really work to that extent. Of course, you know, Dardas is a sick player, but he's not going to be the hard carry. Vote is a great player as well, but he's not going to be the hard carry. So they're like kind of mixing and matching these styles between, okay, we realize that these two players are not going to be it. Cherio, go do it. And of course, Cherio tries his best, but, you know, his team is not on that same wavelength.
So would you say that they just don't have many win conditions outside of Cherry?
Yeah, I would say that's kind of it. I think that, you know, Nika getting big is really their win condition too, because Nika consistently plays the solo lane very, very well. He is probably one of the strongest solos in the league, I'd argue. But the fact of the matter is they just have, between these players, their preferred play styles don't necessarily mesh with each other. And that's kind of their biggest issue.
There's the meshing, and then the lack of other players that'll be able to step forward. We saw that Nuwa pick into the Kali.
Mm-hmm.
We saw that the whole plan was Cherry's going to dive us. We're going to get him low. We're going to ignore him after that, and then Nuwa ult to finish it off. That's it. No trade. You're not getting your heal. You're not getting anything for it. That's got to be homework. Well, it could also be coincidence because Twig has pulled out Nuwa. We joke it's the only way to keep him from dashing in, but...
Yeah, I mean, Nuwa has been an SCC pick for a very long time in terms of just getting picked up by people like Zeros and like Baskin. These guys were picking it before all this happened and before, there were some changes up in the jungle. So I think that, just taking a look at the performance, especially from the Splint 1 SCC LAN, Baskin continuously pulled out this Nuwa, and I think she's incredibly underrated for a long period of time. She's now finally kind of getting that recognition, like, oh wait, this character does damage, and being able to run away, like go up in the sky and then counter, Kali ultimate, or even, running away from Bakasura is really, really going to be important coming up into these next couple of weeks, and especially if this meta kind of stays the way it is for a little bit. I don't know, I think that she was definitely a little bit underrated at this point, at least in the SPL, and so Twig brings it out, and then, oh wait, Nuwa works really good into Kali, what do we do?
Erlang. Okay.
I guess Erlang was the answer.
Yeah.
I got another question about this Nuwa here. I personally feel like Ghost really tries to push the tempo in the early game, but in my mind, Nuwa kind of doesn't fit that style as well. How do you feel that Nuwa fits into Ghost's overall sort of playstyle when it comes to her being more of a late game mage?
Well, to start with, it's Twig. He plays for tempo at every point in the game. He's going to find a way to get in on you, whether it be, I don't even know if he focused on the clay soldiers. He just kind of walked at you in shining metal over and over.
Mm-hmm.
There is his tempo. And if you get in too close, he just roots you. No one expects the passive.
No.
Yeah, I have to say that's probably one of the like least expected parts of her kit that's just so incredibly good. Just walking into a fight with that root, and someone walks up to you, like say it was the Erlang Shen. Okay, you're gonna walk at me, the Nuwa that has a root. I'm gonna pop it on you while you're in the transformations. Then you're stuck there, and you can't get to me with that full movement speed or shield or whatever it is. And then jump into the fog, and then she's out of there, and doesn't even need to spend the ultimate on that. So I think the character's utility combined with the way that Twig plays really made it work.
Not to mention the meta currently with the 3v3 showdowns. You've got PBM, you've got Sam. They're going to make room for you.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
As you mentioned, before that though.
Yeah, go ahead.
You had mentioned what was the SSG's playstyle is preferred going to the late game. Did that just not match up well against Ghost? While I am probably the biggest Ghost fanboy, even when they were rival, I think Ghost is just super dynamic. They've shown they could go up against high tempo early teams. What was it that Aurora trying to play aggressive on them and just ends up giving up first blood, getting body blocked up against a wall. And then they swap characters and they can still play that tempo that matches them. I've also seen them go against SSG who are super late game and PBM can play just as calculated as Raffer. That's what makes them so dangerous, is that they can play to your style and then bring in something else for it. So I think they were at a bit of a disadvantage.
SSG, that is.
Yeah, I think SSG were at a bit of a disadvantage, but I would not say that means it was a problem to play for late.
Sure.
I think it was a team thing, not a, this is just not where the meta is anymore.
Okay.
Right.
Any other final thoughts about Ghost versus SSG before we move on to the finals?
Nope.
All right. Moving on to the finals, which was actually the best set I think I've seen in maybe all of Phase 1. I mean, a big five game set here, going back and forth. Nike winning all the time. Herc being pulled around in the picks and bans. What are you guys' first thoughts on Ghost vs. Radiance? How do you guys feel about that?
That was just a really, really, really good set to watch.
Yeah.
Just period. I mean, who doesn't want to watch a best of 5 go to literally all 5 games between two very strong teams.
And the last match is over an hour long.
Yep.
My heart was going to give out.
Yeah, it was. I was looking at the stats. It was over 300,000 combined gold between the two teams.
Oh man.
Yeah, it was. Actually, Ghost won with 20K less than Radiance, which I mean doesn't mean much at that point. But that was some of the. I did get to see the final set, and that was some of the best Smite I've ever got to watch. I have been to Worlds finals. Those are hard to beat. But from an online viewing perspective, I think that might have been the best set I've ever seen, for sure. You know, it was almost to the point where it sucks that somebody had to win and somebody had to lose because both teams just played absolutely out of their freaking brains. Interestingly enough, a Heimdall lost a whole bunch up until that final game where Panda Cat just went ape mode and destroyed everybody.
It was that build, man.
Yeah, I know. Who came up with that? You know any theory crafters we can chat with? But no, I thought it was a great set all around. I think everybody played extremely well. I don't think anybody dropped the ball. I think it was just. I mean, that was a true set of inches, right? Where just all the little things added up to each team winning individually, and Ghost finally pulled it out at the end, and that was that was an insane set. I don't think there's anything else to say about it. For me, I mean, I'm sure everybody else will, but
I think when we're talking like back and forth, I mean, you talked about before, Frost, how Ghost is just so adaptive and like how they choose to play, and they knew adapting was going to come out with this Daji. I mean, they saw it all 3 games in the semis or something like that. So the fact of the matter is, they basically put adapting down in that last game. He died like 13 times or something by the end of the game, and like just the fact of the mid-set transition to really understand how they needed to decompose the roster of Radiance going into the end of that game was really, really good by them.
Frost? I'm trying to remember a few of the key things during that last game. To me, it felt like they both came at each other right out the gate, eye to eye. I don't think anyone was too desperate to make a move yet. See how it played out. PBM starting off with the Hercules just to sort of see what it was that Aurora was going to dish out. Aurora comes out with a Bacchus, and he's not having an easy time in the early bit. Then he goes into the mid, through the late, and that's more or less where a lot of the real fighting was starting to happen. I feel like that set the pace. That first game, Aurora and PBM just found, okay, we have to facilitate ourselves into the mid and through the late, depending on what it is that we pick. It's almost like while they're all playing this MOBA that the rest of us are playing, they're in each other's heads throughout the entire ordeal. And they were probably super fatigued by the end. And I think it just ended up being like a battle of wits and sheer tenacity trying to get to the end. Like
it was a war of attrition.
Crazy, yeah. It was such a crazy finals for me. Like you said, I've seen Worlds finals, and they tend to be a little anticlimactic sometimes. 3-1s, 3-2s are kind of fun, but it feels like at the 5th one, they run out of steam. But this one had such insane pacing, my heart was going to drop out by the 5th game.
Yep.
I can imagine that fatigue just was literally insane. By the time they get to the last game, all right, boys, let's just make it a quick one. We're going to stomp them. Oh, just kidding. It's 60 minutes long. They had to have been just mentally out of it by the end of that. And honestly, I can't blame them. But that set just in general, I mean, props to both those teams because like we've been saying, either of them could have taken that set. And it just came down to who played really the last couple of minutes better than the other team.
I remember when I was talking to Aurora, piggybacking off your point, Frost, about how PBM and Aurora might be in each other's heads. He did not really seem to think that. He seemed to just think, man, Herc does a lot of cool stuff. It's the best god to press W key with in competitive and things like that. He seemed to downplay maybe the rivalry. And, you know, I straight up asked him, did he feel like he got baited into picking Herc in the in the last game, and he says no, he thought that it was still a play for him, and he pointed out just a couple of mistakes that he made that could have changed the way that the team fight went. What do you think about the players not really feeling like they're in each other's head at all? Do you think that's just him? I don't want to say saving face or anything, but just not trying to show it out.
No, I don't think he's saving face at all. I think they're all too. So there's certain parts of the game that you play, and then when you're asked to explain, how did you know you were going to do this or do that? I don't know. I just kind of felt it.
Sure.
I think we're at a point where we have a feel for the game, but we can't just articulate it yet. That's kind of where I come in.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the translator. I'm not the best player. I'm just saying, this is probably what was going on right here.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I don't think it was the most blatant, okay, League of Legends, we're going to trap Faker into going into his signature LeBlanc, and we fully counter that. We're going to trap Aurora to go Hercules, and we fully counter that. I think they had I think Ghost had a game plan in mind, and it was to the point of, if Aurora goes Hercules for the finals, we'll be okay.
Okay.
Not all right, we're setting them out to completely undo them.
Okay, I understand.
Yeah, I think they don't do enough of getting in each other's heads. That used to be something that we saw a lot of.
At least.
Well, I will say, I think a lot of them are pretty good friends with each other. Like, I know.
Yeah, I think that's the problem.
They go hang out with each other all the time.
They all like each other.
Before COVID, they were, at least. So it's hard
I kind of miss a lot of that, right? I remember one of my first LAN experiences was when I lived pretty close to the studio, so I got invited up to watch some October LAN,
mm-hmm.
and they sat 12 feet apart from each other, and there's Weekend and Pern. You guys remember the play where Weekend goes to steal his speed and Pern comes over the wall, whoops his ass, and then yells at him, "Nice try, idiot."
Sure, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, I was sitting 5 feet away from that. And you just you could see it, and they're screaming at each other "Nice job, you dummy!" Or you used to watch console LANs,
mm-hmm.
and they'd stand up and start pointing at each other, be like, "You suck! You're terrible!" Now everybody's friends with each other.
When did that happen?
They may have to team with each other next year, so they're all like, "Oh man, all right, well done, well played." Outside of talking shit about Bay, everybody's super nice to each other.
GG, good set.
GG.
I think also the COVID situation maybe downplays a little bit of the intensity that you get when you're in the studio and you're able to look across through that window and be like, oh,
you kind of are. You can't really see anything. I've been in there.
I know you can't really see anything, but the fact that they're physically there and you're gonna meet them in the hallways and things like that after you play the set and before you play the set, I'm sure that changes your mindset a little bit. Rather than just sitting in your house and playing online.
Really? I don't know. I figured that anonymity would kind of make you more hostile if somebody couldn't see you.
Yeah, if you can't see the disappointment in somebody's face, or they can't get visually angry at you while you're there. I mean, that's the whole point of the internet. That's why people talk shit online.
Yeah, that's what I'm figuring. Maybe they just don't want it, because they'd get fined. Who knows?
Maybe that's true.
Yeah, I think they should almost encourage that stuff, right? I feel like it's almost too much like golf.
Mm-hmm.
On Twitter,
yes.
Where they're all yeah, great job. I've been there after sets. I've been in the waiting room. Everybody just kind of walks out, grabs their bags, and gets in the shuttle and goes home. That's it. They get in the Uber and they leave. They grab a couple of snacks off the rack and they take off.
I'm just parroting what players have been saying in the content that their orgs are creating. Neil specifically said that he misses some of the in-studio atmosphere that he gets in terms of pumping himself up and things like that. So I was just wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Oh yeah, that was the Knights interview, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
One of those videos where they said, that they show up to LAN and that just gives them that bit of edge that they need to take down their opponents. It's possible. I know Zap is very eye you down, I'm coming for you kind of guy, but it goes both ways because he eyed down Cyclone and got 2v1'd.
Sure.
Yeah, I think a lot of the time, go ahead, Lermy. Sorry.
I was just going to say it's a mental separation kind of even us normies can be the separation of work and play is kind of the differentiation there. They show up to the studio and it's game time. They're focused, and now it's kind of I'll show up and I'll sit down in my seat that I'm in every single day because I can't leave the house and do what I normally do.
Yeah.
So I think for some players that's more impactful than others, and PK is definitely a team that I would say is more impacted by not being able to get into the studio and do that kind of thing. But I think everyone's kind of in agreement. Like, I think LAN is definitely a better environment in terms of like the shit talking and getting all of that great content that viewers love to eat up. Or just, seeing the reactions on their faces, having the player cams there, and seeing someone get 1v1 and then sit back in the chair like, oh. When they die, it's just so good.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I miss the emotion. I just wish it extended beyond the game. Like, I want to see more Twitter beef, right? Like, I want to see somebody get soloed and they take to Twitter afterwards and go, yeah, I knew that was going to happen because he's terrible. Like, he's I'm better than him. Like, there's like zero of that. And I think like 2 years ago when it was all online play or whatever it was, like it was constant.
Sure.
Right. I mean, it was pre-game, post-game, everything. Yeah, we knew we were going to beat them. Of course we're going to beat them. They're worse than us. Right.
Yeah.
Like stuff like that. Like I missed that.
Oh man. Zappin' Weekend season 2 on fire. That was phenomenal.
Pernin Weekend. I'm noticing a trend here, but all the console, that was one of my favorite LAN to watch ever was like console LANs. Because those kids don't give a
get in each other's faces, Jesus.
Like, they don't care. Like, they'll stand up, they'll throw controllers across the room when they get mad, they start yelling at each other. Like, that was like, and like again, it's like golf like now. It's like, oh, good game. Well done. Fantastic challenge.
GG. Really disappointed in the way I played. Yeah.
Somehow, and I think a big reason that that's happening is we like have touched on it a little bit, but the concern of having to play with these people next year, being in good relations with these people so that they don't get in a situation where there's only 8 teams in the SPL. I need to get on this team or else I have to go get a real job, that kind of thing.
Yeah, workplace niceties.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't feel this way. If you get the joy of talking to some of them in private, they don't all feel this way.
Sure.
No.
Well, hopefully when I interview some of them, they'll be a little more expressive.
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of comes down to like, and maybe this is like an interviewing thing. Maybe this is not something that goes live on the broadcast, but like every interview with every SPL player is exactly the same.
I think they did pretty well. I think we did okay.
Yeah, we're gonna come out. We're gonna execute on our game plan, and hopefully, we're gonna win. We have a lot of respect for them as a team.
I definitely.
And so therefore, we're gonna give them respect.
I definitely got some of that when I was talking to Aurora, but I was trying to pose questions that would get them to think a little bit more, and I don't know, try and get at some of the deeper kernels that are hidden behind the layer of PR that someone has decided that they need to put up.
I figured that at least the players in the same role would be a bit more willing to bash heads because you're probably not going to be on the same team if you're both support players. So there's not that.
Well, I know like Raffer and Emilzy used to have some beef, but that beef turned. It didn't look the best, especially with Emilzy stepping down from the league and things like that. I know this is kind of unrelated. Do you think that having it split between NA and EU led to a little more of rivalry and beefing, like friendly beefing, than having everything here?
Yes, it also led to worse games to watch because I would probably be during every EU set.
I mean, regardless of that, right? Like, the beef is one thing and the games are another thing. I would agree that the games have just gotten a lot better since everyone has gone on LAN. But sometimes you miss the beef. All right. Any other things to talk about with the Ghost and Radiance finals?
Ghost and Radiance finals. It's just I
wish I could watch a set like that every week.
Yeah.
I don't know if I could handle it. Like for my health, I don't know.
Comes with a side of blood pressure medication.
All right. Well, now that we've finished with Phase 1 playoffs, the next thing that's coming up here is a huge midseason patch. A lot of changes to the map, a lot of changes to items, a lot of changes to gods. What are the things in the midseason patch that are most interesting to you guys and you think that will have the most impact in terms of SPL? This is a question that I really wanted Aurora to answer, but he was stonewalling me so hard. So let me know what you got.
I too have not skimmed on this patch, so I might not know.
Sure.
I think one way that we can kind of take a look at this, it's not exactly the same, but the SEC playoffs just happened, and it's kind of in a very similar meta to what it's going to be now. There are a lot of jungle and item changes that are going to change it up.
Was SEC played on the midseason patch?
No, it was the one right before it, but the thing about that is that Golden Blade was still kind of, very, very strong, and now that we got Serrated Blade, it's going to be even more amplified. The Golden Blade junglers are going to be in there. So even just looking back at the SEC finals from last week, Mollusk was slamming the Amaterasu, and that's a big thing in rank to be building the Amaterasu jungle with the Golden Blade and going into all these different things. So I think the Golden Blade opens up a lot of opportunities for more, different weird junglers to come out. Like Arachne is now meta all of a sudden. Like, I just want to see someone play Arachne. That's going to be amazing.
God, no. She's already meta in rank for a very long time because she pub stomps, easy carries you to Diamond Masters, but to go all the way to the SPL, I'd sooner see a Loki, please, not Arachne.
No, she's always been good. She's always been like low 60% win rate, like top 10 win rate god across all ranks and levels and everything like that. Like when you look at the stats, and I know everybody and their mother says, well, the win rate doesn't matter, but 60% plus for a god is very telling. The one thing I'll say about this midseason patch is everybody needs to chill out about their predictions, because when you have a major swing in meta, usually there is a major correction that follows it. It's happened every 6 months for the last 4 years that I've been playing, or 5 years I've been playing. Is every time there's a major swing, whether it's a map change or it's a midseason patch or anything like that, there is always within the next 4 weeks a major shift in some direction, because everybody bitches to high hell. Hecate is not going to stay at its current state. Golden Blade is not going to stay in its current state. So all this theory crafting that we're going to do over the next however many minutes could be completely irrelevant come Tuesday, 2 weeks from now when they do a bonus balance.
Sure.
Because it's pretty obvious that there's stuff that just cannot fly. And until we see how far they adjust it, and they are aware of it. They're aware everybody hates Hecate. They're aware everybody hates the Golden Blade meta, because you're building it on ability-based assassins just to get the farm ahead, so you don't have to dump mana on jungle camps, right? So they're aware that that's a problem. So, do I think that Arachne is still going to be strong afterwards? Yes, I think she'll still be a ranked pub stomper. I don't think she's going to make it in the SPL like Frost said, but I really think that, especially at this point, it's hard to draw theories out about how this is going to look when they're still figuring out, from a Titan Forge perspective, how this meta meet what their objectives were with the midseason patch.
Sure.
If that makes sense.
I totally understand. You have any thoughts, Frost?
I think this midseason patch is going to reflect pretty much every season of Smite. You're going to have, let's see, I'm going to write on my notepad here. You're going to have the middle crew. This is going to be mid-tier teams. For now, I'll just use Sanguine, who goes for a very solid, very consistent draft. Nothing crazy. I think they're going to be about mid-tier. And then you're going to have one of two things coming out. Who's good at experimenting? This is where I think Radiance is going to come out. That's why they were so hot at the start of the season, is that they can just go in and find the most smork W key stuff to play. So you got teams like Radiance at the top. Ghost is probably going to end up somewhere there as well. And then who's a little slower to really come into much of any meta, or is just hesitant in general to practice newer things? That's Obey Renegades. I wouldn't say they're hesitant to practice. They're just very adamant about setting their own metas all the time.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's okay, this is what we're dealing with now. Let's go to the complete opposite side of it. Let's see what we can find over here. And then, as you said, there's going to be that overcorrection, and that's when it's going to stabilize. The first few games, I don't really think they're going to be telling of how the rest of the phase is going to go.
Okay.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, Frost.
Yeah, I definitely can agree. I think this jungle change and things like that, where the minions are going to have aggro and things like that, I can see that really having a bigger effect than it would in ranked in the SPL. Just because, it really can come down to that very small minutia of, oh, my ADC accidentally tanked the Alpha Harpy, and now they've got 30% less attack speed coming into this, and they just, they didn't register it because they haven't practiced with it enough, or, the little tiny details that have been changed in the jungle, I feel like they could make a pretty big impact for teams that, aren't really processing it, and for teams that are, like, seeing the debuff around someone means, okay, let's go, or, seeing that, in duo lane, like, this support does or has the aura around them that makes them invisible to minions or things of that nature. There are a lot of little small things that teams are going to have to start to pick up on, or they're going to be really confused as to why they're losing a lot in the early game.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, just to Frost's earlier point, I actually think the first couple of weeks are going to be interesting, especially if the bonus balance changes are relatively perceived as minor. Because what you're going to see is like 3 to 4 weeks before the major changes come in, where, the team that does the best job of adapting to this craziness is going to take a couple of games and get out an early lead in the split. The ability to adapt early is going to lead to your standings at the end, which leads to seeding, which leads to being able to pick your opponent or what have you. Right. So I think, the first couple of weeks could actually end up being important with how they adapt to the meta, even though it's obviously going to change pretty significantly. Like auto attack based gods are the best right now. Mage ADCs are annoying as hell. Everybody's got 80% pen. Tanks feel useless. Like everything is shaken up to the point where, you can get a solid mid split lead or at least early split lead in the standings if you're just good at adapting to this. I think that's what we're going to see. I think we're going to see a lot of people try a lot of different stuff.
I think they should, especially with, say, new purple buff. First one to touch it. Now you take, you have less physical protections, 30% more physical damage, something like that, but the minions go on you less. Okay, then the compositions on the other team, if you're now more susceptible to physical damage, I'm not going to have a mage ADC, maybe not even a guardian. I'm just going to put 2 physicals there and run you down. Something in that way, shape, or form. But it does depend on how much of a lead they're going to get. I don't see too many teams keeping up a lead beyond, say, 4 games, 4 matches. And this is a triple round robin.
Yeah, they boosted up the schedule for phase 2. It's now going to be 14 weeks long.
Right.
So, I have to mention the sledge, because I've been seeing that everywhere in all the ranked streams. I've been seeing Cherio sledging around in the jungle. I've been seeing it everywhere. What are your thoughts on the sledge? I've seen it in supports. I've seen it in solo. So, like, is this like the new hot item of mid-season patch?
I like the way that Aurora had it, how he says, we need these kind of items that have these effects and have these names. It's the sledge. Here comes the rage, the sledge, Deathbringer. They're iconic. I love these kinds of items coming in as well. But as far as how good is it, to me, being a support player, it brings back warriors and assassin supports. It's adding way more versatility.
Yeah, it's cheap. CCR, health, power.
I think we've already seen what is it? Is it Oni Hunters? That's the you get mitigation depending on how close people are to you. It's kind of the same thing but with protection. So people have been picking up Oni Hunters anyway on supports and solo laners, so I think that now that they have this extra kind of thing, I can get mitigation and I can get protections from being near people, I think that's definitely a way that they're going to look at it, and honestly, they could start to go towards a health build. I know Hinduman has been on this health train of Stone of Gaia, Mail of Renewal, all of these items getting, tapped in certain directions are kind of shifting the meta, but the big question is, are auras more relevant than these health items? I think that's going to be the big determining factor. I mean, because we've seen, I know Frost had a video on this before about Genetics Kepri build, getting the Stone of Gaia anyway, just having that 99 HP 5 to be able to sustain up in those later game team fights where they get poked out and they have to back.
I think we're going to see, maybe we won't. I think there's going to be heavy favor towards just straight mitigation, because there is so much pen in the game right now that the only way to survive is mitigation. Prots feel meaningless. Positioning for supports is more important than it is for the carries now, because you just get exploded. And if you're just somebody, if you're somebody who gets free mitigation, like Ama, Osiris, yeah. I mean, I think we'll see it more in the solo lane, and you can stack that with like a Kepri 2 and an Oni and a Spirit Robe, and you're cranking at like 50% mitigations. Like that's the only way you're going to survive. Also, I'm calling it now because with all the item changes around percent pen, because anti-heal feels so bad to build right now. Maybe not in the SPL, but in general, Mail Renewal will become the best tank item in the game. I'm calling it.
Ooh.
I'm calling it.
I actually forget how much stuff it procs off of. It procs off of towers, objectives, kills.
Assists.
It's insane.
I actually asked about this before they buffed it, but for the longest time, it is like one of the most winning items in every game mode except Conquest. Because if you think about it in Arena, you're getting 15% heals every time you get an assist. Assault, it's the same thing. You're just absolutely flat out unkillable.
I thought Mail of Renewal is actually just straight up banned in Assault.
No, I don't think it is.
I don't think so. I think
I read Assault today. I don't think it is.
But
it's just allowed such a crazy.
It's just such a crazy item. It's got tons of HP 5, cooldown, health. I think the cooldown's pretty irrelevant because you get it from other sources, but a 15% heal over 3 seconds when you've got 3,000 HP is insane.
Yeah.
Man, and Chiron heals what? Over how many seconds with his passive? Oh, I'm sorry, I had to get that at but
Oh, no, not this again.
One day he'll get a passive.
I think it wasn't built because you could itemize into, especially like the Divine and the Brawlers. Like it didn't feel bad to buy those items with all the item changes now, where you've got auto attack based assassins. Ankh is a little bit better, so I think you're going to see more than that. But you're not going to pick up an Ankh just because their Geb has a Mail Renewal.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah, but it cuts down shields. Absolutely.
All right. Well, maybe because the Geb has it, but not if the Athena has it. Right. But or the Zhang has it. But I think it's going to shine as like a super, super awesome item. I built it the other night, and you feel like a monster.
I think Ankh kind of will work into the way that people have been going because, like we talked about earlier, Shell is being built on carries even over ages. So having that ability to take away the shield just in general is helpful. So I don't know. I think that it could kind of be that counterbalance of, okay, now, Ankh is going to be a very common support relic because everybody's building Shell or everybody's doing X, Y, or Z with all that healing or just to be able to deal with that kind of nature. So I think that it's going to be interesting to see at least how that develops for supports because we've been saying it the whole time. Supports are just not as tanky as they used to be.
Because we're going a more damage route alongside the whole positioning thing.
Yeah.
Everyone's doing way more damage. The job of the support right now is to get my nuke safely to the drop-off point. That's my assurance in how I stay alive as a support is I'm getting my damage to where they need to be before your damage gets to me in a way such as it's getting to the point where Spirit of the Magus is core item and Sunder just makes my mouth water.
I've been looking at the Sunder too. I think it's really going to be pretty useful in a lot of situations, especially if Shell keeps up its usage rate in the high level play. I think Sunder is going to be just right up there with it, especially if it helps you, like you said, bring your nuke to the drop off. People are going to take it. I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on the physical penetration changes that have happened. I know a lot of the hunters, especially Zap, who I've been watching a lot of his streams, they weren't super happy at the beginning, let's just say it that way, about the changes to Exe and things like that. But I think now the hunters are sort of figuring out that there are some new builds that they can go for and things, and they can still be effective in team fights. So what are your thoughts on the physical penetration changes? Do you think that keeping everything similar between magic and physical damage in terms of penetration is the way to go here? Or, I don't know, what are your thoughts?
I like the changes, and coming from also, I just enjoy Duo in general. You're doing a little more damage personally as a hunter, but the tank's going to be taking a little less overall because physical protection reduction is almost non-existent now. We're just not building it.
Mm-hmm.
Alongside the pen changes, though, I think we're going to go back a bit more in the Season 6 meta where hunters were in the mid lane being played in the mage role, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Especially Chiron. Oh, my lord. And Ven popped off in Season 6 with Chiron. I don't know if anyone's going to play it, but it is such a good character right now.
I've been talking to Zap a little bit, and he says all he's practicing are mage ADCs to bring to the long lane. So, maybe your prediction will play out here.
I'm not sure about that. What made them so strong in Season 6 was you can do damage as a mage, obviously, because you have abilities, and not get slowed.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's no movement speed penalty affected with it. And on top of the rings having movement speed themselves. Now that's gone. You are basically a mage, and you don't really go well in the positioning fight in a boxing battle. If you're both attack speed, the mage is going to lose, I believe.
Okay.
I don't think they're going to be so prominent.
I think that sustained damage from hunters is really strong coming up in this meta, especially if they're going to be, supports are going to this more health build. It could be like that, whereas in this past meta, it was really all about getting that big burst onto a tank or a carry and forcing them out of the fight. So, if sustain in just the item build is more prevalent on at least the frontliners, having that sustained damage to be able to continually, keep them poked out or be able to keep fighting, like especially with Atalanta's bow, being able to really push forward in fights. Like, having an Atalanta's passive on top of a Bloodforge shield, like that's going to just be insane if people go towards that avenue. So I think that, we could really see those mid lane hunters come back out, especially like Medusa just got buffed, Neat just got buffed. I think that those two in particular could be seen. I think that we've seen in the past how Neith can really kind of control a meta, at least a little bit, to be able to set up your team, kind of be in their heads a little bit more, because, whenever you see a Neith charging ult, the comms are going to be, Neith is looking this direction, she's going to try and shoot at you or set something up, someone's coming, of that sort of nature. We haven't seen that in a very long time, but the fact that her backflip even got changed at all is just very telling, because that's a character that's had that same exact ability for, I don't know, the entire time she's been in the game. So now that it's even a little bit different, people have got to reestablish that muscle memory.
It's still like the worst escape in the game, but yeah.
It's different though.
It's still super predictable. It doesn't go over walls. It's just quicker.
It doesn't go over walls, and you still get pulled by Wheelish. It's the worst trade-off for it. But I think she might end up being top contested, not a top-tier pick, but just really highly contested.
She's good. I ran a build on her the other day, and it probably is just super inefficient, but it was like Trans and Soul Eater, Heartseeker, and you get and Titans somewhere in there. And you can get 40% CDR with 370 power, and your ult will have 60% penetration on it.
Ooh,
and that's a lot of damage, right? That's she's nuts. She's nuts. Her clear is insane. She's not hard to play. She's not hard to hit her stuff. I think the danger with a character like that is that the skill ceiling is so low, and if you put a lot of reward around reaching that skill ceiling, they become super OP because everybody can play it at a high level. I think she's going to be really good.
Okay. Before we talk about other changes to gods, I have a couple more questions about items. Are there any other items that you think are really popping off that we haven't talked about?
Atalanta's bow is nuts. Serrated edge is nuts.
Serrated edge is just really pushing those like auto attack assassins forward a lot more. The power boost on that is really, really great.
Mm-hmm.
I think it only really works well with like Erlong and Arachne because they're the only ones who dump their whole kit when they start.
Yep. Someone tried to tell me Bakasura, but I'm like, if you can't eat,
you blow your lead. I actually think for variety they need to reduce it to 2 abilities down. But it's still a good item. It's such a good item that people are building it even on like ability based characters that dump their whole kit, right? Like you could use it on Thor if you really wanted to. So your autos after the fact do a bunch of damage, but I don't know. I think it's like niche, but also it only really makes sense on like 3 people, 3 characters.
Or like Rat. I think the new Rat with the crit acorn is going to be real good.
It's actually I don't know if I can talk about it.
Then don't
there's
talk
going to
about
be
it.
a blog post. All right, how about this? There will be a blog post about Rat's win rate with each different acorn, and the results will shock you. How's that? I can say that.
That's great.
You probably guessed what I'm getting at, but
sure.
It's the thick bark acorn. I know it.
Last question about items here, and I posed this question to Aurora too. With the prevalence of Golden Blade gods, do you feel like Golden Blade is coming to that place where every jungler is gonna pick it up for the clear?
They already do. We'll see after the cost nerf, which there is inevitably going to happen.
Even the Thors, even these ability junglers are picking up Golden Blade. I haven't played too much.
Yeah,
on
absolutely.
This patch,
you can clear. You get enough attack speed out of it, and you can clear the side minions, where you don't have to blow abilities on camps anymore, which is a absolute huge part of reasons you need to back, reasons you can't fight, reasons you can't take engagements. Right? Like if I'm a Thor and I don't have 240 mana, I can't full dunk somebody.
Yeah.
Right. Like if
Essentially has like MP5.
Yeah, it's exactly what Frost said. It basically has MP5 because you get enough healing off the camps that when you murder, even if you use an ability for every other jungle camp, you still have basically full mana sustain. And if you're pathing correctly, where you're doing like a big camp, you use maybe your 3, you go to a Harpy, you auto those down. Right, your managing of your mana and your ability to stay out longer and your ability to take fights just goes like through the roof just by having that item.
Do you feel like that Golden Blade being so ubiquitous limits build options for junglers?
Yes. Which is why I think wait a couple weeks.
Okay.
To see what they do.
I think junglers got shafted a bit. They got this amazing item, but you're going to be stuck playing the same 3-4 characters, and if you don't, it's going to be the same play style for all of them.
It's feeling to me a lot like Golden Blade back in the day around season 3, season 4, where it didn't matter what hunter you were going to play. Not Golden Blade, Golden Bow. I'm sorry, I think I misspoke. And just everyone had to pick this up. I mean, because the crits were great, but also because that's how you get pressure in the lane. So
it's kind of the opposite, right? Like if you don't pick somebody who synergizes really well with Golden Blade, you're kind of like behind, right? Like I was playing a Thor game the other night. I had 8 kills. The enemy Merc had 1, and he still had 2 levels on me, and I was out farming, invading, and everything else because he just runs around and just clears everything instantly.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right. I had 8 kills and 2 Gold Furies, and we had 2 towers, and he was still out leveling me. It just does not matter. Yeah. No, dude. It was a rough game.
The items should be strong, but they should also encourage playstyles. I think Golden Blade's a little too strong, and it kind of funnels playstyle.
Yeah, I mean, it's just inefficient not to get it, right? Like you said, you could be winning across the map, but you just aren't farming the same if you don't have it.
Nope.
Okay. Let's talk about gods a little bit. We mentioned Rat with all the changes that he's got. Are there other gods that have changed that you think might have been underrated or overlooked changes that are going to sort of sneak in through the mid-season patch and make a lot of impact?
Chiron's going to be gross.
Talk about Chiron, Frost, for a little bit.
All right, so in Season 6, we had Fail Not. We also had some pretty good cooldown and pen options. So we saw him being played, not too much as an ADC, but in the mid lane by Ven, because he just has so much control. And that one is completely underrated. It keeps your tank, your frontline, whoever, just keeps them running at everyone because you're cleansing for them. But you do so much bloody damage with Chiron building power and pen. Now you've got just a simple build like Trans in the boots, in the Soul Eater, in the Fail Not, and then you can do whatever you want with the last 2 items. He does so much damage.
Yep.
And the pathing for the build, if you will, it's not too expensive. It gives you the right stats at just the right amount of time. Transcendence made it kind of wonky. Initially, it was you get the 10% cooldown first, but now you have to stack it and get the 10% after. But even then, you've got the 10% there. You got your boots. Soul Eater's got another 10 on it. It's got pen. Then you've got the Fail Not, which has more pen and 20% cooldown plus crit. You can almost build anything these days. That's what's weird about these builds. We have variety, because you can build all these things and you end up with all these stats that you probably weren't even expecting.
Interesting. Raythan, you mentioned Merc. What is it? Just another great god that has Golden Blade that can make a lot of impact in team fights?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of Golden Blade and Serrated.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you pop your 2, poke with your 1, dash, and then you just beat the holy hell out of people.
Sure.
I think he's gonna be good. I mean, he's a Golden Blade god, but he's kind of like, he doesn't need it. It's like good on him, but his 1 kind of full clears everything anyway. But I think it's a combination of that. Serrated. It doesn't feel terrible to build 3 katanas anymore. I think one of the big issues with the katana tree was it always felt like you were building something you didn't need, right? Like Merc doesn't need a hasten.
Yeah.
Like you can use it if you really want to cheese. Like Arachne doesn't need a hasten. But you could spec into like that core 3 of like Golden Blade, Stone Cutting, and Serrated. All of those feel good to build on Merc. And they feel good early. Their cost is reasonable. They're huge power spikes for him because not only do you get the power, you get the passive movement speed, which increases his power. I think Merc is going to be nuts. Even if they do a cost nerf on Golden Blade, he's still going to be good. His prevalence is going to shift towards like mid to late game versus now where he's just everywhere. But he's up there with like Arachne in terms of good gods to play right now, in my opinion.
Okay,
Lermy, you have any under the radar gods that might?
Yeah, I think it's really going to depend on how Ring of Hecate ends up, changing. But Ao Kuang right now is getting played a lot more than he has in honestly, 2 years ever since his 3 got the Polynomicon removed. I think that really crippled him a lot. But he combined with this ring build that's now kind of insane. With the cooldown reduction on his Wildstorm, I think he's going to come back at least a little bit. And of course, having that execute is just always so nice. And, you try to kind of shuffle in wherever you can. I mean, Sam Forsaker played Thanatos a couple of times. And so just having an execute is so nice. And now that Ao Kuang is kind of like in that towing the line between being viable and not, is really nice to just kind of bring that back because, of course, Khepri is super meta right now, and being able to execute through that is really nice as well.
Okay. Last question about gods here, and then I have a question about invade meta. What do you think Cthulhu's impact on the SPL in particular is going to be? Do you think he's going to be like a first pick, first ban type of god, or what are your thoughts?
It's really tough to say.
I don't think so. I think people will ban him just because they don't want to deal with him.
Yeah.
I don't think they're going to ban him because he's particularly strong. I don't think he's performing well right now either. They nerfed they gave him the hands.
Which one? Wait, what they nerf?
They nerfed everything. He can't use relics anymore. Then they reduced his healing. They reduced his damage. They reduced.
They did a lot of stuff
scaling.
like that. I think the relic is really the most impactful because you're in that ult for so long, and making it so that your support just can't use relics while they're in that. Like, if someone dives the backline, of course you can heal them because you're so big, but like I want to shell them while I'm up there, man. So just the fact that you can't do that anymore is really damaging, at least a little bit.
I think before these changes came through, he would have been in every game, banned or picked. But now with this, you've got warriors who can go toe to toe with him. You've got guardians that can go toe to toe with him. But
hey, you just melt them.
Yeah, we'll see how that shapes out. Because
I think removing the mitigations on his transfer.
Dive.
Go ahead, sorry.
He still has ridiculous dive. And that's sort of where this meta is. We have to play a lot closer now, as many people have noticed. You're not nearly as tanky, so you can't really go out and do your own thing anymore. Cthulhu is, all right, guys, I've got let's go in. And we're all staying together. As some of the craziest dive of, I'd say anybody. You've got Amas, you've got Nikes. I think he has the best team dive.
Yeah, I think his team fight disruption is up there with like Yorm, right? I think the big thing about Cthulhu was the removal of the mitigations on transform. Because if you were smart about it, you used to be able to just 80% damage mitigation, like the biggest abilities, right? And then you're like, oh, okay, well, the raw alt's down. Now it's my time to just walk at them. Can't really do anything. Whereas, before I think, I don't know. I played against plenty of Cthulhu's recently, and I can think of like maybe less than a handful that were impactful enough that they were winning their team's fights or anything like that. You just turn and kill them, right?
Sure.
Yeah, I think people have gotten past the stage, and I mean that would have been true in the SPL anyway. But just in general, where they're scared of this giant thing walking at them, that was kind of the feeling, at least for the first couple of days that he was out. And now people have realized, oh, he's not as tanky as I thought I was. We can just turn and kill him. And so people, have been able to learn how to deal with this character a lot more, and he's not as busted as people really think he is when he's in that ult.
Sure.
Especially now with Magus and Sunder, he's gonna melt.
Yeah. Okay, bringing it back to the SPL a little bit, the second phase is going to start here in the next week. And I know that as we get to Worlds, there seems to be a propensity for teams to just start invading. Do you feel like the invade meta could come back as we get closer and closer to Worlds? I know that there's the Invader's Curse now that makes it very hard to invade early on. But, players love invading. I think I've talked to a lot of them, and they feel like it's a great way to disrupt the enemy flow a lot of times. So what are your thoughts on invades, particularly as we start phase 2 going into Worlds?
I think they're dead. I think, at least in the normal sense of things, like in duo lane, supports are sometimes getting a second hog or, not using their hog initially so that if they're losing pressure, they can just walk into their purple and hog it that second time so that it's not stolen away. So honestly, on that side of the map, I don't see it as much, but we've been also seeing a transition of people going over to blue basically on cooldown to steal away the buffs from the solo laners. And, it might be more impactful now that there's a little bit less sustain over in solo. Glad Shield is not the same as it was before. So having that change could possibly make it more impactful, but also people are kind of used to it now. They know that, okay, purple's maybe not the way to go. We're going to go to blue now. And, they have that idea in their heads, like, okay, we have to defend this when it comes up. And so just having that mindset to begin with, to have that information, like, okay, this team's going to come over here, that's just really the first step to being able to counter it.
I think it depends on the meta. Aurora actually hit the nail on the head for this one. Currently, there is a way to play that allows you to end the game before 30 minutes. If you mess up, though, now you're on the back foot, and it's going to be a 40, 50, 60-minute game. If you are going to invade, you're going for high pressure, you're going to play relatively perfect. But if you drop the ball, then invading was absolutely pointless. So it depends on the team. If you like playing super high octane, you're going to be going for invades. You got, PBM, Aurora. They're going to be the ones doing that kind of stuff. Whereas SSG's they don't have the worst mindset. Why bother invading when you could end up throwing it and you're going to go late anyways?
Raythan, do you feel that way about invades? Are they dead now?
I don't think so. I think we're going to start seeing them on purple buff, and I was talking with some players last split or before they put the Invader's Curse out, and there was some talk about supports harassing junglers on the blue buff side. So you wait for them to clear, speed in their backs, and then you just beat the hell out of them. Either you wait from there, you wait for them to clear the blue buff, solo laner goes back to solo lane, and then you just follow them around and beat the crap out of them. And I don't know if that's going to be the case. You can herc W key at somebody and push them away. Like, even if you die, like, you're setting the jungler back pretty far. But I heard them talk about that. I don't know if that changes with Invader's Curse, but I think we're going to see a lot more of the purple buff level ones where maybe it's pick some early pressure stuff, try and get a pick, have the solo laner teleport back to lane, right? So you start your solo ADC support on their purple. Solo tries to help you steal or stun or whatever, and then teleports back out. We may see a bit of that, but I think the traditional jungle invade is pretty dead. I mean, there's almost no reward there. Every jungler buys hog as it is. So you got to be like perfectly timed with a lot of damage.
Yeah.
Like, you'd have to hit the perfect blink herc push without them seeing you.
Baka support.
One time. Hey, you're totally right.
One time, just blink into the Invader's Curse, eat, and die on the way back. But you're there in time for red. So
what was that Hazer tweet recently about the new genetics double assassin build that he was going?
What was it doing?
I think that's far more likely is the double Assassin's Blessing, just jungle clear.
Yeah.
I've been seeing that, but you fall so far behind.
You can. It's usually you pick somebody with like good, like an Achilles or like a.
No, I mean just by gold in general, because you have the Guardian's Blessing. Okay, but then there's also after the 2 minutes you have the I guess the support sharing that turns on. The person who's got the lowest XP, when you share camps, you get essentially more for the split. And you just fall so far behind if you don't go Guardians.
Honestly, we could see a support start in mid again. I think that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. They could, start at purple, give their ADC that's a very high clear to be able to just hang out and do it by themselves and then put the pressure back in mid to invade red. That's kind of the only real pressure point that isn't really accounted for here, because I think purple is kind of off now because of the damage buff on whoever gets hit by it. So, I think you could invade purple, but I think red is kind of the one that doesn't have any defense mechanisms around it.
I was thinking that. I didn't know if it was like not really an invade, but supports harassing the mid again. I just don't know if that's going to work out now that we have that little barrier in the left gold side mid camps.
That's true.
It's way more dangerous to just kind of chill there and wait for the mid.
Yep.
I mean, my thought process is you help out your ADC with purple, then you sprint at their red buff if you have a high clear mid, or you just come to mid and out pressure them.
Yeah, I think you'd be looking to blast them when they go for their
when they take that first hit.
Yeah. Because the red, they typically don't go for red until much later.
Well, they go one wave and then either the sides or the red, depends on their start.
I haven't seen a single mid go straight to red because of the buff on it. You just take too much damage.
Oh, we'll get after the buff.
No, not after the patch. He was saying that he would either stay and try and shove the next wave for pressure, or he would go for the side harpy. Because red right now, unless you do buku damage, will beat your ass.
I think it can, like you said, but if you have a character that has really high secure, perhaps, you play the Scylla or something that will have the crush there, I mean, it could still work out, but it takes a little more experimentation than, we're thinking of right now to be able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how do you guys feel the phase is going to go overall? What do you think is going to be the best team, the worst teams? What are your thoughts on phase 2 in general? And who do you think is going to have the best seed going into Worlds? I know it's way too early to ask these questions, but I'm asking you anyway. So what do you got?
You don't want to hear from me. I'm a big underdog fan.
Who do you think is going to be the underdog then?
Yeah. What's the script? What's Hindu Man's script right then? Give us the script.
I think the Renegades end top 3.
Ooh. Okay.
Spicy.
That is
now I could see that. I could, just because Jake loves non-traditional supports. And right now is the best time for them to shine. Scylla support is way better now. All right. We've gone too far, but in actuality, Warriors in the support. Whereas I wouldn't get an Assassins, it's almost like season 1 where you had this choice of, I'm going to go Guardian's Blessing or, Watchers back then, or I'm going to get the new Warrior's Blessing and just completely push you out. I won't get a lead, but if I can keep you behind, it's almost the same thing as me keeping up with you with the Guardians.
Sure. What about you, Lermy? Any spicy picks for the phase?
It's going to be tough. I think that, like Frost said way earlier, the team that can adapt to these changes the best is going to really succeed, and Ghost is definitely up there. Radiance likes to experiment, so I think those two will kind of maintain their top 2 or 3 spot. I think we could really be surprised. I mean, Renegades, like Ray said, does come out and pull the weird stuff too, because Jake just likes to experiment. So I think experimentation will really be rewarded. I think the people that, theory craft and big brain this will really be able to come out on top this split.
Frost, any last thoughts?
It's the most odd thing. This is why I always vote week by week, day of, because it goes in different. The phase is going to go in different phases. Where at the start it is going to be who experiments and does well, who decides to kind of opt out from experimentation, and who experiments and just is way off the mark. Then after that, you get the mid bit, I think, is the most exciting for me. This is when they've all sort of come into it. We kind of know what we're going for. We kind of know who's comfortable on what. That's when we get those sort of playoff type games.
Mm-hmm.
And then the latter bit, that really is it's going to depend on the standings.
Yeah.
I know everyone likes to say that they play their best all the time, but if you're guaranteed first seed, you're probably not playing nearly as hard. Or if you're not even going to make it, you've got nothing to prove. I don't know.
Unless you're playing spoiler, right?
Yeah, that too.
Yeah,
I think it needs a lot of context for what it's going to be.
This is gonna be a horribly unpopular opinion, and I will get roasted whatever comment section this video has. But I think Obey will surprise people. I don't necessarily think they're going to be like a number 1 or maybe even number 3 team.
Oops.
But I truly think with Sino, he's going to be moving down. I think, each one of those players is, Bobby's obviously a question mark to everybody, but with each of those players being fairly good in their own right, Ducky's, I think he's the best player on their team. I think they're going to surprise people. I don't know where that puts them in the standings, but I wouldn't count them out just yet, in my opinion.
It's more of a gauging thing. I have, for this phase, I have high hopes for Obey, especially seeing as how Bobby goes. I mentioned I gauge a player on this is how well you're doing. This is how well I think you could be doing based on the characteristics that you've shown in your games. Bobby's got the head for a support.
No, he does.
Bobby's
a student of the game.
Yeah, especially when he went up against Knights. And the Knights, I don't know if they were trying to break him. This was exciting. It almost felt like it was a 5v1, and it was just all in the head. They being Knights, kept getting the Fire Giant so low and kept resetting it. Kept getting it low and resetting it just to try and, I'm assuming, bait Bobby to go on in. And I would have jumped like 3-4 different times way before that. And I feel like the Fire Giant got down to 5 HP, and PK still didn't finish it because they were looking to bait a fight. Bobby held for all of that and turned that. Obey got the Fire Giant. That was wild to me. I think their success is going to come off of Bobby.
That's a good.
I completely agree. Totally agree.
The biggest question mark for me, though, is E United. I think their change is really surprising, especially putting Snoopy in support. Like, Snoopy is a great ADC, and of course they needed a support to fill, and the big question mark was, well who's it going to be? And they said, no, we don't need one. We need an ADC instead. We're going to pick up Guy J, and I don't think Guy J is a bad player, but he's got absolutely no SPL experience, so I think it's going to be, I am concerned for them in the fact that, they're going to have to really, compensate for that and, kind of take him under their wing and really, push him forward. And I think they've got the minds to do it. I think that, these are some guys that really like to grind the game, and, they're going to be able to really be able to, be the wing that Guy J is going to, rest under. But I think, it might come down to them performing poorly in the first couple of weeks, and once they get into the swing of things, they'll be doing a lot better.
As far as E United is concerned, I'm kind of drawing as well from the research I did for the videos on each team, but I'm super concerned about this. Even it was like season 3, Snoopy doesn't stick to a role. He's never specialized it, and it's hard to master a role if you do not just spend years on said role. Hurrywin, I think, is an amazing player, but he had his best performance when he had strong specialists for each role. Now you've got Snoopy on support. He's a great support, but is he going to be one of the greatest supports? I don't think so. And Guy J, I don't have much of any research on him at all.
All I've seen is the Guy J ranked games. So
I saw Panda Cat doing that the on her fake out where he just kind of jumped in place, made Guy J jump as well, and then he died.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest tragedy of this whole COVID thing. Like, yeah, losing Lynn sucks, but Genetics being unable to play is because he's such a phenomenal freaking player. Got a bit of an ego, but he's such a good player.
Yeah,
I would say it's a healthy ego. Like if you want to be in the SPL, I think you need to.
And actually, that's what I was talking about earlier, where I was like, I'm missing that, right? Like, yeah. He was the Twitter shit talker, but genetics, like when you think of people who are like true students of the game, and I think it's so important to have 2, maybe 3 of them on your team that just figure stuff out and just mess with everything and are constantly trying to figure out ways to do things better. Like genetics is probably, I mean, he's at least in the list of like top 3 people that I know that do that, right? Outside of like coaches. I think not having him in the league is much. Yeah, he studies the game so much. And not having him in the league is an absolute tragedy. Also, breaking news. I don't know if you guys have had Twitter open while we've been sitting here, but in the last hour, Deathwalker has officially retired from all things Smite related.
Oh.
I was gonna read that afterwards. Yeah.
I did not have my.
I just saw it, so I was like, oh, like,
no more.
No, part of that was his own doing. He would have played this year if he hadn't done some stuff.
What he did.
I was under the impression what I'd heard is that when he was shopping himself out to teams, he made a mandatory package deal with himself, Callus, and Ice. And basically said, we're not playing without each other. And then after teams that are already formed, instead of coming in and saying, hey, I'd like to try out to be your solo laner.
Yeah.
I had heard, maybe it wasn't him, but somebody in that group of 3, the way that they were pitching themselves were, hey, you should pick us up for those 3 roles instead because these people are bad.
Yeah.
Like the team you've picked out is not good. Versus like advocating for your own individual skill. Because I think there's a couple of solo laners that he 100% could have outshined this year, and it was that mandatory deal with Ice and Callus that I think screwed him. At least from what I've heard from people who are now on teams, right? So
I think he made the best decision though for his long term. Sure, you could be great, but he wants that extra edge. When we're talking about players who are at the top of their game, you want whatever can provide that sort of longevity and that final boost. I think for him it was Callus and Ice.
Yeah, I think demanding what teams you play with is arrogant. I think demanding, you look at any professional sport, right? I mean, you don't have hockey players saying, "Hey, I'm only going to play on the first line for your team if I get to play with this other person, so you better make that accommodation." It's like, no, like you're part of the team. You
need
are
to be
in this
like
role.
LeBron James to even make that request.
Yeah, exactly.
There's
if you're
not
LeBron,
a LeBron
maybe you
James
can ask nicely
in Smite yet.
But there's so many players in traditional sports. This is a 5v5. It's almost not out of the question. We have Sanguine. They are playing with the people they want to play.
Right.
I'm not saying these players are, begrudgingly altogether, but maybe it's not the first pick. I'd say with the way the format's set up, I'm sure some people kind of might have, just taken the business route over the part of the game.
Sure, yeah, and I've always been like horribly against the way teams are built in the SPL to begin with, so I'm a little biased there in my statement.
I very much agree with you, Wraith. I think
the idea of shopping out a roster is the stupidest thing that you can do as a player because it gives all of the power to the orgs, and you are unable to individually advocate for yourself and your salary and anything else because you are a product of the lowest common denominator on your roster.
Yeah, I think it's because they're expecting people to go the high route or the TSM route of League of Legends. That's kind of how you did it way back when. It
is.
Lone skill would get you onto teams.
The other thing, though, I think that plays a big part is that a lot of these orgs don't have the infrastructure to scout these players in advance and to make actual qualitative judgments. I think also.
I think that's a problem. I think if you're getting however many thousands of dollars to field a roster, you can take a week to learn something about Smite, learn something about your players. You just make it
because
you make it easy. You make it a financial decision, right? It's like, hey, we got this team. Everybody's pretty good, right? I don't have to invest any time in it.
Sure.
Nobody would really be mad at me if I picked up Adapting and Benji and Aurora, right? Sure. What's your salary demands? And then you just negotiate on that.
I think it's a little bit of both, where a lot of teams come together before players are given a chance to negotiate individually. And then on the flip side of that, from the org side, a lot of times, and I don't know the internal working of orgs. This is just how it seems to me as a fan. Let me preface by saying that. But it just kind of seems like they take the easy way out by signing a team that is already together. Because if I was an org, I would do that too, because it's easy for me and I don't have to spend the time or money to do research or like have a scouting department or any of those things.
And I think the players enable that.
Yeah.
I think the players enable that.
Oh.
Yeah.
I always said there should be a draft. Or you go through round, not necessarily a draft, but you go through rounds, right? Like you pick your first player, you make a salary offer. That person is your anchor, and you say, "Hey, look, you know what? You're adapting. You're going to be making $50,000 a year. Everybody else is going to be making less than that."
Yep.
And then you go into the second round. You say, "Hey, we want to make an offer to Cyclone, but it's not enough money. But if you're willing to play for 45, we can get Cyclone. Do you want to play with Cyclone?" Okay, great. Well, now we've blown our budget on the two of you, so you're going to be playing with 3 SEC players.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and I think a lot of,
a
lot of those sorts of thoughts
thing that allows for creativity, and you can advocate for yourself. And the people who are really good, like why in the absolute hell is adapting making the same amount of money as pick another player on the team?
Sure.
Right, when he's widely regarded as the better player. Like if you're a Super Bowl quarterback, you make more money than all the other ones.
We don't know the salaries officially, but
they do team salaries because they pitch themselves as teams.
Yeah, I know that they do that because I remember I was talking to Raffer before this season even started, and he said, "You know what? If I can get all my boys a salary that's pretty good and the housing is paid for, then we're going to be good as a squad. No other questions, basically." So, I think one thing, and I might be coming off here as a bit of a leftist, but like it's hard to do collective bargaining in this industry, especially in esports, and collective bargaining helps lead to sort of these like standardized ways for players to interact with orgs instead of teams. So, maybe that's an issue, but that's like a much bigger sort of esports issue and not really just focused on Smite or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even collective bargaining; it's individual bargaining.
Well, no, but like collective bargaining means that you have some rules set out for how the individuals can negotiate with organizations. Whereas now it's like basically wild, wild west, as far as I can say.
Yeah, quick, get a team, get an org.
Yeah, it's like
we've only got 8 spots.
Yeah, who's gonna get the org the quickest is sort of how it feels like.
Yeah, I think Hi-Res should structure it. I think like team formation should be a structured event. Mm-hmm. First of all, it's exciting off-season content.
Yeah,
we really want to talk about it from a league planning perspective. Like, oh man, like who's the third member of the team and the final person on the roster is, you know what I mean? Like,
sure.
Stuff like that is
you get the hand people roses and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. But you get 5 weeks of that. You don't get
5 weeks of nothing. Yeah.
Yeah, you could have tryouts. You could have negotiations. You could have competition. Like, hey, I'm Cyclone. I'll play for less to be on a team with adapting. Yeah. I will, things like that, right? Like, I mean, there's just so much more that can come from that. And ultimately, it benefits the players because the orgs have to take a vested interest in the game.
Yep.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
They have to. They have to dedicate resources to it, which they should.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We should not be making this easy for people to just show up and get a paycheck for fielding a team.
Yeah.
Anyway, I could talk about this one for hours. This one gets me riled up because
sure.
I think it hurts me because I negotiate for a living,
mm-hmm.
right? And seeing the players do everything that you shouldn't advocate for yourself. And coming out with the lowest everything, the lowest, and I hate it.
I think knowing what you want is probably really important for these orgs too, right? Like if you are a new team and you're kind of like wishy-washy on your salaries and things like that, I think orgs are probably just like, hey, there's this other team that already knows everything that they want, and we're just going to give it to them because it's easy.
But that's the problem, is that players create that atmosphere.
Sure. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Well, they're players, not negotiators, but that does trickle down all the way to the bottom. I've had I've been involved with some combine teams or some minor league teams, and their practice is just there is no fire for that. There's no negotiation. Some of them are, I'll get on a team with this guy, but I'm only going to play Raw and Thoth.
Mm-hmm.
What is this that you're doing to yourself?
Yeah.
I wish it was a bit more structured, but cutthroat, not so open, Wild Wild West.
Right.
Yeah, it's just difficult because at this point people are really vying for those spots. There are less spots than there were last year, so they've got to put up the best offer as quick as possible and be willing to accept a lower offer because they come off as being desperate of wanting to be in the SPL, or it kind of is just a statement of success, I guess, for them to be able to continue to have 40K. I'm happy with 40K or whatever the statement is, and it's gotten to the point where they really need Hi-Rez to step in or someone like that to restructure it, because at this point it's gotten so toxic to the point where orgs are kind of not necessarily colluding, but before there was some drama about X, Y, and Z, or saying this thing to one team and this thing to another team and things like that. So there has to be some point where the foot gets put down and there's more structure to it.
I'm not sure how much is their fault too, because you may have 12 top junglers that could field any of these 8 roster spots, but you've got like 4 good supports.
Mm-hmm.
How is it that you're going to manage all this stuff? Even genetically, while it was a joke, it kind of did strike a sense of this is it. We had to put Snoopy on support and get a different ADC because we can't find a good support.
Sure.
Like that with mid last year, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was the same thing. But no, I think you push all the power away from the players. It becomes a competition of who's willing to play the cheapest, because half of these orgs make no money.
Yeah.
And if they overpay for any reason and you don't come out with a win or something where they get a split of the winnings, they lose money. So would you rather field a team for the cheapest where you're guaranteed to make 50 grand? I'm just throwing that out there.
Sure.
Right. Even if they come in last place? Or do you want to bank on a team, pay them 40 grand, and then have them potentially wet fart like half the teams did last year? And now all of a sudden you're closing your doors,
Sure.
So, or it's a massive loss. And so I don't know. I think there needs to be structure around the team selection. I think it would be better for the players, especially individually. And I also think it would give rise to more of these like shining stars that don't get a chance because they don't have a name.
Absolutely.
Right? Like,
I miss those days.
Part of the reason that there's no support depth this year, or one of the reasons, is Emilzy said, I'm not going to play for the amount of money that any of these teams are giving me. So I would rather work from my home country. Right?
Yeah.
If somebody decides it's not worth it for them anymore, or if the team doesn't have the money to pay somebody else got a chance because Emilzy didn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or declined. Right? Or they just didn't have the cash for it. And I think, either one of two things is going to happen, right? Is either you're going to see rising stars get selected more often because they're willing to pay for less, or people who are orgs are going to buck up the money, an extra $5 grand a year to get a really good player, right? And then, and that leads to, that's both good scenarios for the players in both those situations.
Yep.
Either the recognized veterans are getting paid more for their time and effort instead of the same as everybody else, right? Renegades team, Jake is getting just as much money as Barra. Barra is a 2-time world champion.
Well, and also brings like so much more to your brand.
And it was the first one.
Like not to shit on Jake or anything, but Barra brings like way more to your brand. Like he's doing a podcast with Aggro. Like he's a 1K Andy on Twitch. Like, I mean, getting 1,000 concurrent viewers on Twitch is very good as far as like being able to market that person, and the audience that they have is like, that's like something that I would pay more for, right? Just personally.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Is Jake, who's brand new to the league, getting the same amount of money as Barra?
Yeah.
Or I don't know that to be true, but you run into situations like that when you do team bargaining.
Yeah.
Where Barra should easily be paid more than everybody in that squad just for the additional brand visibility.
Definitely.
Right.
Definitely.
So anyway.
All right. Thanks everyone for watching. We'll be here again at the same time next week on Thursday. That is 3 p.m. Eastern. Here at twitch.tv/apam productions. We hope to have guest analysts in the future with all your favorite pro players coming in for an interview. So if there's anybody in the scene that you want to be on the show, send me a DM at apam2 or at apam productions on Twitter. and we'll try to do it as much as we can, as long as we can schedule it. Along with this, there are going to be extended cuts of my interview with Aurora and the discussion I had with these analysts posted to the Apam Productions YouTube page. So be on the lookout for those, and I hope to see you guys next week again.